G'day. It is. God, it sounded very Australian there. G'day. Welcome. It is Blueies and Shoeies with the first podcast of 2025. I hope everyone had a blessed Christmas. Happy New Year. The first podcast of 2025 is my 2 cents, brief insights on each team for the Guinness Six Nations 2025. It should be a cracker. Historic rivalries renewed, and I am dead excited to be back to international rugby in just over a week's time. If you like what I've got to say, if not, comment, like, subscribe. Without further ado, let's jump straight in. Wales. Been a tough ride for the rugby-loving nation. They had a golden generation of superstars, a good 10 years at the top of European rugby. Certainly took South Africa very close in 2015. Think about 2019 and that kick from Andre Pollard from, 45 out on the left-hand side in Japan, only to be followed up by a balls of steel turnover by the lovely, the great, the one and only Francois Lowe. Tough rugby-loving country, and unfortunately all too familiar story. Rugby union organisations, associations, enterprise, however you want to frame it, for me, run by dinosaurs. Men in tweed jackets that are gone with the times, old school mentality to a new modern day sport, modern day audience. Wales are lagging behind, unfortunately, for this great nation. Warren Gatland seems to be treading water. Unfortunately for them, I've got them finishing stone last once again, back-to-back wooden spoons it will be for me. The one positive certainly I can see is a couple of good young players. The captain, Jack Morgan, seems to be a rising superstar at flank. He's had his injuries, I think, last year in particular. But bringing back a couple of old heads, I think, certainly just to navigate what will no doubt be a tough year still. The likes of Liam Williams, Josh Adams, Toby Faletau, who will certainly be well past his best, on his last legs, but they're mainly for the change room. Rounding up the young lads, majority of the squad haven't got 20 caps yet. So you're looking at a very young team, certainly a team that you would imagine come 2027 in the World Cup be more competitive without being a name on the list that you would put to actually compete for the World Cup. Should certainly be more competitive than what they're likely to be over the next 18 months. The idea for those older heads in the change room will be to no doubt get Wales playing more consistent for longer stretches of the game. Warren Gatland will no doubt be urging these guys to be in the ears, be a support, a shoulder to lean on for what will no doubt be a tough year in a sense of poor results, mistakes, and a good few losses. So I've got them finishing sixth. Hopefully the likes of the Jack Morgans and those real up-and-comers can learn from those older heads, the boys that were part of that golden generation who could impart their wisdom and knowledge to really fast-track and expedite this young team. In fifth, the mighty Azzurri, Italy. Had a terrific year last year, I thought. Brilliant. So good to see them play far more exciting rugby. Adversely to Wales, this should be a golden generation for Italy. Now, to South African fans, Kiwis and the like, the golden generation often means competing for World Cups. Who knows? That would be brilliant to see a football country, a country so bought into football, attract greater audience locally at home. They've obviously got a few players that they've brought in from further afield. But when you consider that centre combination of Brex and Monticello is an absolute superstar. I'm not sure if he's actually fit, so there is a bit of concern there. I know Liner, his father was a Australian international World Cup winner. I know he's out along with Alan, but the backline between Gabrezi, Capuzzo is back, who plays for Toulouse. If you can get in that Toulouse team, then you're a hell of a player. Scored a great try in European rugby on the weekend. Looks back to his best. So between Gabrezi, Capuzzo, Brex, and Minicello, there's some real exciting talent, and certainly a forward pack that stacks up far better as a whole than years gone by. Drawing to France last year, really a game they should have put away, and having a couple of wins for the first time in many, many a year. Having Wales at home will be a big target game. But first up, Scotland away will be tough, but certainly they'll want to put down a strong performance, a performance they can hopefully build on. And who knows, frighten another team or two. They should really be able to give Scotland a very good game first up. They should beat Wales at home, and whether they can scrape another win somewhere else and surprise one of the big boys. Italy at 5, in 4th spot. The old enemy, England. They've got a chance if they're able to put another performance together as they did last year, which was very few and far between, and beat Ireland away from home. If the first game, which is always an interesting one to see how teams get off the mark, if they beat Ireland away from home, they've got a very good draw. France at home and Scotland at home. So the teams that they'd want to play away from home, they're playing away from home outside of Ireland. I can't see them doing it. First up, Mario Toji is taking on the captaincy. Will that affect his natural game? Being an interrogator at the breakdown, at the maul, that's where he operates. That's where he plays his best stuff. He's got a strong complementary piece in George Martin. But those two guys are really going to be supporting what is a relatively new-looking front row. They finally made the right decisions by letting the likes of, albeit Joe Marler, kindly made the decision himself to retire. Great player for England, as is Dan Cole. But those chaps have seen their best rugby. England, if they want to develop, need to have had these chaps already with, 10 caps under their belt. They've introduced a couple of new front rowers with Apoku Foju, who has got a strong write-up, seems to be getting a lot of traction in the press. There was certainly a big tussle with him and Ellis Genge in the local premiership game. So it should be interesting to see how he fares. Thrown in at the deep end in international rugby in the Six Nations. Cowan Dickey's back, and with Jamie George relieved of captaincy duties, I think Cowan Dickey is quite a mobile prop, with Theo Dan starting potentially at hooker, and the decisions they've made at scrum half. It seems like Borthwick is certainly going to be playing a running brand of rugby, a lot of ball in hand. The more traditional scrum halves have not been picked, and moving on from the older generation of front rowers, it should be really interesting to see how England set out in their first game against Ireland. The loose trio combination, Cunningham South, Curries, Ben Earl, Tom Willis, they've got a lot of talent in that loose trio. It's finding the right combinations. Do they move Cunningham South to lock? Do they bring him on as an impact player? Whatever they're doing, it's not working. The players are not performing to their best consistently. Ben Earl in the World Cup and the post-Six Nations was outrageous. It was a far cry from what we saw, though, against New Zealand and those autumn internationals. So how can Steve Borthwick get those players to play at a consistent level? We've obviously seen a huge amount of churn, as we did with Eddie Jones, in the coaching staff. So there's a lot of question marks with England. On paper, I look at that team, despite Fayu Oboso missing, who's a real firecracker, two really, really intelligent, highly rated fly halves in both Finn and Marcus Smith. who I think is the informed international fly half. I'm too scarred. I can't overlook the many opportunities they had over the last 12 months to close games out despite the Irish victory. Too many games thrown away in those last 15, 20 minutes. So I've got England at 4. And at third, a team I've really got a soft spot for, further enhanced by watching Mel Gibson and Braveheart on the weekend. Aye, freedom! Scots at 3. It's this year or never. Now or never for Scotland and Gregor Townsend in particular. This is the year that will define his legacy as Scottish coach. Consistently nearly men, consistent pretenders. This is the year for them to break through. Now, I do know that they've had shocking news with Siona Tuipulotu getting injured on the eve of the tournament. Possibly the most informed centre in the world. Combination with him and Hugh Jones is fabulous. And when they play off Finn Russell, if they get a decent foundation from the boys up front, it's an outstanding backline. Blair Kinghorn playing brilliant rugby for Toulouse. Again, you get in that team, you're a very, very good player. What I've really liked is the likes of the Fergusons, the Rory Darges, adding more grit, more steel to that forward pack that I've always just thought have been a point and a half off it against the big boys of France, South Africa and the like. And I think that's epitomised in a player like Jamie Ritchie. Very intelligent, plays with heart and grit, but is possibly, just in terms of size and impact, just a little bit off it. So if he's either coming on to the game and impacting and the legs get tired, that'll be really good. The likes of Rory George just have a little bit more firepower, a little bit more engine, a little bit more steel, but provide that platform for the Maverick at fly half and Finn Russell. This is the year. No more excuses. Scotland have to deliver. If they don't win it this year, they'll never win it. The future is looking very sketchy, taking into account the under-20s and the like. Scotland need to deliver, and this is the year. Even without Lotu, they've got enough in the tank. They've beat England on many occasions. They've beaten France, certainly away from home. Ireland always seems to be the tough one for them to overcome. But this is the year for them to deliver. Now or never. Come on. No more pretender status. Go on, Gregor, get these boys over the line. However, I've got you finishing third. In second place, the Irish. Ireland. What a team. Andy Farrell, the man's man, the Alpha's Alpha, is away on Lions duty preparing for next year's tour of Australia. There'll be Simon Easterby, long-term coach, that'll be taking over the Irish's assault on the 2025 Six Nations. Should be interesting to see if he brings anything different to the Irish game. Will we see a different style? On style, it's certainly been rumoured. There's a narrative that Ireland have been found out. They look very flat against New Zealand first up in November and just scraped past Australia. Australia really should have won that game last year. So despite them winning 3 or 4 at the back end of last year, they certainly didn't look a team that has been on the top of the world rankings. However, let's not forget that performance in Durban last year, off the back of a loss, giving South Africa a taste of their own medicine. They were brutal. Certainly one of the most physical games of rugby in the last few years. The Irish absolutely delivered when it mattered most, despite their World Cup conundrum at quarter-final stage. This is a team that is set to try three-peat. This is still a very strong Irish team. Couple of concerns. Cian Healy and Peter O'Mahony are still part of the squad. As per my comments on England and Dan Cole and Joe Marler, these guys have been great servants to Irish rugby. Certainly, I think Healy still has something to offer at scrum time, which can often be difficult for Porter. But really, they should be bringing the new generation through and giving them an opportunity to get some runs under their belt. Caelan Doris leads the team, a classy, very classy number 8, skillful, dynamic runner with ball in hand. That loose trio is something else. We've seen that they've got very intricate plays in terms of setup in South Africa, sort of at the back end of those games, the way they were able to counter 22 dropouts. Almost scored on both games, certainly scored on the first game through some really nice, skillful play. A lot of people are speculating that their backline play and the short passing is being found out. I'm certainly not convinced. I think if they get parity or win the breakdown battle, it is very difficult to keep up with the speed and skill in which they play with the backline. If they get past 3 phases, you can very quickly end up chasing ghosts with this backline, especially when they get in full flight. There's a lot of good players there. Big question is, it still remains, who is going to formally take over the Johnny Sexton throne? Crowley, I think, has been decent, been very solid. The Munster fly half. But Pendergast is rumoured to be the future. Certainly seems light on in terms of weight and physicality. So if he does start, opposition teams are likely to target him. But certainly a guy with huge ceiling, a lot of potential, a lot of upside. Very skillful fly half. A young lad that should come on leaps and bounds over the next couple of years. So it should be interesting to see what Simon Easterby does in the Andy Farrell absence. And that's the Irish finishing second this year. And that only leaves one team. A team that will finish first despite playing Ireland away from home. I have Les Bleus. Allez les Bleus. The French. Antoine Dupont returns to the Six Nations after winning the gold medal with the Sevens. Team at the Olympics. Congratulations to him. What a player, a generational talent, a genius. And the way the French play rugby, instead of the fly half running the game, it is the number 9, who is the play caller. And to have the best play caller on the planet, the man with the skills and the talent to do pretty much anything, they are going to be very, very difficult to beat. They remind me of the old Muhammad Ali slogan, fly like a butterfly, sting like a bee. And where they sting like a bee is by those big brutes up front. Good Lord. Even as a South African, these boys are huge. I think to the quarterfinal of the World Cup, the best game of rugby I've ever seen. And I think about that first half where South Africa were just doing a bit of bob and weaving, a bit of counter punch to stay in the game and targeting Bill Barry, the young winger who's certainly come on leaps and bounds and is one of the form wingers in the world. Had Eben Etzebeth not knocked that ball down or backwards, certainly, if they go 2 tries ahead, I don't see South Africa getting back in the game. These boys are monsters. They're not all French, let's be honest. They're not all French, but they're monsters. Doesn't look like Paul Willems is there. I'm not sure if that's through injury or through lack of form. But a team and a country that has 2 full divisions to pick from, who apparently one of their best players, or most formed players, is playing in the 2nd division and has not been recalled by Stade Francais, is a bit of a strange one. But the depth and breadth of talent is huge. Only to be rivaled by South Africa in terms of players playing the game, and then cherry picking every now and then. The likes of Mia Fau, an Australian-born monster at lock. God, if you thought about him and Skelton playing for Australia, that could be the biggest, heaviest lock combination that's ever been. Certainly, I guess they'll give a good run if Paul Willems played with him, but he is an example of the monsters that they've got up front. Dynamic, strong ball carriers, good scrummaging team, littered with a French flair. The flying like a butterfly comment is all the backline. Pernod, Bill Barry at wing, complemented by the returning Intermac. This team is unbelievable. I can't see them losing. The two big concerns I have for France, and I think those will be for the next few years, these monsters can't play 80 minutes at the intensity at what they play, certainly typically in the first half or early in the second. The intensity, if they're in full flight, if you don't get blown away, you're in with a chance. I thought New Zealand counter-punched like South Africa did in the quarterfinals of the World Cup. I thought they did that brilliantly in November, and they could have certainly and should have potentially won that game by hanging in the game, staying within 5 to 10 points. Once the big boys get a bit tired, if you're able to weather the storm, you've got a strong chance of staying in it and potentially nicking a game off the French. And the second thing is a bit of a psychological one. You know, the famous 2011 to 2015 New Zealand team had a no dickheads policy. I think that is about how you treat others within training, how you treat staff, fans and the like. You've got two players that have recently been acquitted of rape from the tour to Argentina. Now, I'm not here to say they did do it, but what they are doing is probably against team curfew. And they took a second team. So these are not superstars that are returning. These are guys that went with a B squad to Argentina last year that are obviously breaking rules. You got Matthew Bear, who had a terrific World Cup until Evan Etzebeth absolutely ran over him in that second half, and he kicked the ball out of play. He was fantastic at fly half in the absence of an Intermac. He decided that he wouldn't be on the bench against New Zealand after they picked Ramos, the typical fullback, ahead of him. How would you feel as a patriotic Frenchman if a guy decided that he would not be willing to come off the bench for his country? Now, that can typically, without trying to generalize, be a part of the French nature, very emotional characters. But if I thought, I just couldn't bring myself to think of Ches Colby, any South African superstar, any South African desperate to play for the Springboks. I could not imagine anyone not being willing to be a match day 23. And I think in the deepest, darkest parts of a game, in the most important games, World Cup, defining game in the Six Nations, when it really comes, when it really matters, I think those things come through. The guys that are not willing to get off the floor that 0.5 seconds quicker, guy that's not willing to play for his country because that's someone starting ahead of him in the game, blows my mind. And that's the biggest concern. And I don't think, I think there was something about Cyril Bay in some kind of burglary case before the World Cup. This is not something uncommon to the French team. They are certainly a very good team and can beat anyone on their day. But that's just something that lingers for me that might have a percentage point, as small as a percentage point to play over the course of a year during a World Cup. However, that team is littered, absolutely littered with superstars. I've got them winning it, despite playing Ireland away from home. If you can weather a storm against France, you stand a good chance. But typically, they blow you away with power and punch. That's my predictions for the Six Nations. Would love to hear your thoughts. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.